Yeah, finally.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to all from all the corners of the world who've come to remember Jim Beckford. We haven't planned to be a formal memorial. Several obituaries have already been written about Jim's many achievements, and there'll be lots more. But we want this just to be a gathering of those of us who knew him to talk about how we remember him. And I've asked a few of those who knew him well to share some of their memories. And then the floor will be open to others who also knew him either directly or indirectly to say a few words if they want. And I'll end by showing my slideshow of photos again for anyone who missed it or would like to watch it again. My own memories of Jim go back over 50 years to when he was looking into the Unification Church, the Moonies, from the outside. One of his students was a former member, and I was looking at them from the inside for my PhD. It was a great opportunity for both of us to compare notes. I remember at a conference in France, we were sitting next to each other on a panel, and Jim whispered to me that he wondered whether there were any Moonies in the audience. I threw what I thought might be a practiced eye over the people in front of us, and I whispered back, I'd go for the second one at the end of the fourth row. Jim had a quick look. Ha, he said. He's head of the local anti-cult movement. His brother's a Moonie. I won. And I remember there was the CISR meeting in the Netherlands in 1973, when a bunch of us early career sociologists of religion got together. And we've remained friends ever since, some of us going on holidays together, before or after, meeting up at conferences. At least two of the class of 73, as we call ourselves, Jim and Richardson and Meredith McGuire, will be sharing some of their memories with us on this Zoom. We had a 30th reunion in Turin in 2003, and Jim was planning for us to meet up for our 50th anniversary next year. In 1991, I asked Jim to join the Board of Governors at Inform, the educational charity I set up 3 years before to provide information about minority religions. To my delight, he accepted, and then from 1999 to 2018, he was chair of Inform's Management Committee. This meant that he and our treasurer, Andrew McGuire, whom we'll hear from later, and I were in constant communication, meeting in person regularly, but in touch by email on average at least once a week. After we'd both retired from Inform, our emails continued right up to a few days before his death, usually about things that had struck us as funny or interesting in the news. I think that his last work thing that he did was to review the latest Inform Routledge series volume on Zoom launch exactly 3 months before his death. That was the penultimate picture you saw. And you can see the actual recording on the website, Inform's website. Though Jim was a few years younger than me, I came to think of him as a brother. He was always encouraging, always. But there were occasions he disagreed or disapproved of one or other of my ideas. And usually after I'd given it some thought, I would come to agree with him. But on the rare occasions when we did disagree, we found no problem in agreeing to disagree. Whatever the outcome, I knew I could always trust and respect him and love him as an older brother. And now I'm going to ask Jim Richardson, one of my younger brothers, to share his memories of Jim. Jim?
Thank you. If I have been made into a co-host, I have a picture to myself that I would show. Well, that's better than looking at my mug. I did notice in the slideshow that you presented earlier that our ties were well represented, but I thought I would nonetheless have a picture or two of the ties. As Eileen just mentioned, some of us met in 1973 in The Hague. That was my first international meeting, as a matter of fact, 49 years ago. And that's where I met Jim and Eileen and Meredith and some others. And we've remained fast friends since and have had a wonderful time visiting together. It's nice to see a lot of your faces on this Zoom, but I could only wish that it would be with happier circumstances. This is a very sad time for us to try to get together and remember our wonderful friend Jim. We connected many times over the years. I counted up that we went to conferences in at least 15 different countries together and did traveling afterward with our spouses, Cynthia, Julie, and sometimes colleagues such as Eileen and Peter and Meredith and Jim. So we've had some really good times together. This is a shot that I don't even know where it was taken, but I thought I would include it because it includes on the left there our daughter, Tamitha, who also grew to know and appreciate Jim because she encountered him at some of these same conferences as we traveled together long ago. We also have ended up traveling some with Jim and taking granddaughters along. And here are a couple of shots. That one is with Mont Blanc in the background. We were in Switzerland doing some hiking on that particular trip. And here we are in France with our eldest granddaughter sharing a wonderful meal in Annecy together. Then here's some shots, just random. I have dozens, if not hundreds of shots of things we've done together. And here's a shot of all the grandgirls with Jim. They all got to meet him when he came to Reno one time. Julie and Jim came here and visited us, and we visited them in Kenilworth and Nelson B as well. Jim and I have done a lot of writing and research together and encouraging each other's work. But I must say it's been very one-sided because I've gained so much more from Jim's work and how it has infused my own work with his theorizing, his ideas, and he's been a very good supporter and sometimes critic, which was helpful. We also email very regularly, by the way, and often daily, exchanging emails about things of mutual interest concerning our scholarly work and also about politics in our respective crazy countries and around the world. And I still find myself opening up the New York Times and saying, Jim would like that, before I remember all of a sudden that he's no longer there answering his email. Here's a shot of us playing cribbage, which we did on many of our trips. He was a pretty good cribbage player, but I gave him some lessons over the years, I think. He also had some very unique talents, by the way. I don't know how many of you knew he was a juggler, but he was actually a very accomplished juggler. And on one of our trips where we took our young granddaughter Beatrice to the United Kingdom, he gave her a juggling lesson using these balls they were tossing around. Jim and I developed some great traditions over the years. You've already seen one of them, the ties that we would wear to all the conferences. We would make it a point to wear those ties to the conference dinner. And we had our picture taken with lots of folks over the years with those ties on, and some of you, I hope, remember them fondly. We also had a tradition of some wonderful sipping whiskey. One time when I visited the UK for a conference, I went to actually it was a meeting in Glasgow, and I toured some distilleries and found one called Glenturret that we decided we liked. And from thereafter, when Jim would come to the meetings, he would bring a bottle, a very expensive bottle, I might add, of Glenturret, and we would share it, and we would invite friends in. And a number of you on this Zoom call today enjoyed some of that sipping whiskey with Jim. Jim was a wonderful friend, colleague. I miss him dearly. I'm surprised I've kept it together during this brief talk. My daughter, my wife, my granddaughters all grew to respect and love him as we traveled together over the years. And I'm very grateful for having known him for the 49 years that we shared together. Thank you very much, Eileen, for letting me offer those few remarks.
Thank you, Jim. Sophie, are you there?
I am here. Thank you, Eileen. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, okay. I've written something because I can't keep it together. So here goes. I was just finishing my PhD in 1994 when I spotted an opportunity to work as a postdoctoral researcher on a project about publicly funded chaplaincy in the sociology department at Warwick University. When I saw the name for further inquiries, Professor James Beckford, I thought to myself, could this really be the James Beckford? Beckford, whose name had figured in my A-level sociology course textbooks. It was, of course, and I felt hugely privileged to be offered the job to work with Jim. Under his careful guidance, we launched the Church of England and Other Faiths project. And I just want to share a photograph that we took at the start of our project. I'm just going to try and share my screen. Just 1 second. Can everybody see that? Excellent.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Good.
Yes.
So I want you to just make a careful note of Professor Bob Jackson on the left of the photograph and the robed Buddhist monk Ajahn Kemedamo on the right, as they're going to figure again in a minute. And you can see Jim just standing in the back of the group. Jim was the most wonderful mentor and guide throughout my time at Warwick and after I left Warwick in 1998 to go and work with Professor Grace Davie in Exeter. Jim advised in relation to all sorts of professional issues. He attended so many events and meetings that I organised in connection with my projects at Cardiff University, especially those connected to chaplaincy, of course. I could not have wished for a more supportive or generous mentor. For many years, there was an inevitable professional gap between Jim and I in terms of seniority, age and experience. But when I got into serious road cycling about 6 years ago, the professional gap seemed to transform into a friendship that revolves around bikes, cycling and all the associated kit. Any conversation about professional matters was always preceded by a natter about our latest bike-related acquisitions or the merits of different kinds of braking systems. There wasn't much that I could teach Jim about anything, but I did successfully persuade him to download a cycling app called Strava onto his phone. The app records rides in terms of route, distance, wattage, calorie burn, elevation, and all sorts of other technical details that are of great interest to cycling nerds, which I think Jim and I could be called. Best of all, Strava has a social media dimension so that one's followers can send a digital thumbs up, known as kudos, after a ride has been logged. Jim was my most loyal Strava follower. And so for the last 5 years or so, we've been giving each other digital kudos via the Strava app and occasionally commenting on especially interesting rides. Because we both cycled up to 2 or 3 times a week, especially in good weather, it meant that we've been in very regular contact in recent years. But Jim wasn't just a fair weather cyclist. In years gone by, he would be out on sunny winter days despite the cold. And in fact, it was when I noticed that he'd stopped recording bike rides on the Strava app earlier this year that I was alerted to the possibility that all was not well. And of course, it wasn't. I don't want to dwell on that now because I want to share some pictures of what was starting to become a bit of a tradition, which Jim named our annual grand day out, all in uppercase letters. With the exception of a couple of years, we settled on a day each year for me to take my road bike over to Jim's home in Kenilworth. And so began a day out on our bikes, pedalling around the lanes of Warwickshire with a pub lunch or a scone halfway. On a couple of occasions, we linked up with Professor Bob Jackson in Leamington Spa, also a keen cyclist. And on our first grand day out in 2017, we paid a visit to the Forest Hermitage near Warwick to visit our Buddhist friend and monk, Ajahn Kemedamo. So this is just when we'd arrived to visit Kemedamo. The day would end by calling in to see Professor Eleanor Nesbitt and her husband in Coventry for tea and warm conversation in her garden. Jim and I, we had our last grand day out last July, and so I'm ending by sharing this photo that Julie took for us after our last bike ride together last summer. On this occasion, Jim gave me a little cyclist wallet, a very lightweight, waterproof wallet, just big enough to hold some cycling essentials. It's been with me on my bike ever since last July and will remain with me, a constant reminder of Jim and the happy times we shared both on and off our bikes. So I'm just going to stop screen sharing now, I hope. My little wallet. It's just become one of my treasures because it was from Jim, who has just meant the world to me for so many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Véronique.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's going to be hard to keep it together as well on my side. So, you know, if I were to think about well, if Jim had to say who he was for me, he probably would have said, and he said sometime, well, I was just a babysitter. The story is that I was doing my PhD in France, and then my supervisor, who didn't spend a lot of time with me, thought that actually it would be great if I could just go to England and do a comparison with what I was doing. And he said, oh, there's this really nice chap, you know, Jim Beckford, and he speaks French, you know, perhaps you should just go there for a year. And I thought, oh, that's great. I always wanted to just go to travel and perhaps live abroad for a while. I didn't know it would be a permanent situation at the time. And that's how I ended up doing 1 year of PhD in Warwick and work with Jim. So he would say it was the babysitter, but I think very quickly for me, it became the real dad. And I have to say, I have to talk about what it was to be supervised by Jim, because it was amazing. He would just contact me every month to say, well, just pop in on Wednesday, and you know, you'd come around 11 or 12 and we'll have a chat, and then he would take you for lunch. You know, he would always pay for lunch and dinners, and always say, well, when you have a job, you know, you'll pay for your meal. And then we'll go back to his office and we'll talk up to 6 p.m. until it was time for him to go back for dinner. It would always tell you to just go for it if you have an idea of something you could apply for. He would always read everything in detail, see mistakes, even in French. He would keep all versions of text that, you know, as a student, obviously you would lose. You would talk about something interesting and say, oh, I know a text about that. And he would just take it from his files and go to the photocopy machine for you to make a copy. I know he lends money to students waiting for their students' grants. He would invite you over. He wrote me amazing supporting reference letters that I never believed that, you know, it was too good to be true. He would correct my English. And it's only when I became myself a lecturer and a supervisor that I had those moments when I felt absolutely mortified because it's only then I realized the time and the energy spent teaching me and helping me, and how costly that was. And also you realize that you will never be able to get it back, to give it back to him. And I thought that best I could do is be myself, a good supervisor, but I'm always been acutely aware that I've never had the patience that he had with me. I would never be where I am today if it was not for Jim. Don't know if I would be an academic, definitely not having a job in a UK university. He built my confidence. And something that has to be said about Jim's supervision, and which is very unusual and incredible, is that Jim built people confidence, give advice, support tremendously. And at the same time, he never really sort of imposed his own personal intellectual preferences. He would never say, well, you know, this approach is not that great, or I don't really like it. And you know, the paradox is that at the end of the day, I became probably very interested in social class and a very Bourdieuian approach that was not his. And yet it's still, Jim really still shaped me up as an academic. So it is something really, really outstanding. And I always felt like I was a bit his baby. After all, you know, I was born in 1974. So just when the Jims and Eileen, met, I was really the next generation. I always looked for Jim's advice and approbation over the years, and I was very happy to see on the screen Douglas, because we're linked also by someone else. And when Matthew died, the first when I thought about getting back together in terms of my intellectual trajectory, the person I went to see was Jim. And I went to see him in Birmingham, and we spent the whole day talking and having lunch, and I was telling me what I wanted to do. And I'm really happy that I just after COVID became a bit easier. I did the same thing in December. I flew over Birmingham, and it's exactly like 20 years ago. We would meet, go to the restaurant, having nice food, and talk throughout the whole day. Show me a bit, the changes in Birmingham. I brought him some Irish whiskey, because I know he really liked the one I sent him, and he gave me a scarf with Japanese little cats on it. And again, we talk about research, and today I'm just writing something new, and it's full of Jim's comments, because I never thought there would be a day, when I couldn't turn to Jim to comment one of my crazy, draft. And yeah, I feel like I lost a father of some sort. There's just nothing really concluding I could say apart from this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Véronique. Laurie Beaman.
Sorry, I'm taking precious seconds fiddling around, finding the right buttons. Hello, everyone. Like Sophie, I wrote my comments because I was afraid otherwise either I would go on far too long or I would not keep it together. And even then, I'm not sure. So here we go. How to summarize Jim's mentoring and friendship in 5 minutes. It's impossible, but I know Eileen will cut me off, so I'll do my best. Jim emailed me some months ago to announce that he had returned to the study of the Japanese language. This was Jim, always learning, always embracing life, living large in a quiet and modest way, whether juggling, unicycling, extolling the virtues of the water rower, or perhaps sometimes less modestly sharing the details of his 30+ K bike rides. And yes, Sophie, the grand day out, I heard about those too. He marveled at the ice road truckers, delighted in sharing with me construction information for dry stone fences after my partner Derek and I visited him at his beloved Melsonby house, and extolled the virtues of various breakfast joints of Ottawa. Those, especially Zach's, made his face light up. In fact, I began to suspect that the reason he had said yes to my invitation to be an advisor on the Non-Religion in a Complex Future project had nothing to do at all with our intellectual goals and everything to do with the opportunity to avail himself of the breakfast places of Ottawa. At our last such breakfast, Jim Richardson was virtuously sent a photo of his fruit-laden, good-for-you platter of food to his wonderful wife, Cynthia. And Jim Beckford, on the other hand, tucked into his great Canadian breakfast with sausage, bacon, eggs, toast, and beans with relish. Jim and I did have a few points of difference that remained unresolved. I'll mention the most contentious. I'm sure most of you know about his passion for owls. I supported this by occasionally giving him owl-related trinkets, tea towels, and the like. And then one day, Jim announced that he'd seen a documentary, and it turns out that, based on a series of tests of their intelligence reported in the documentary, as Jim put it, wise owls are not so wise after all. Arguing that this was fake news and that human measures of owl intelligence were hardly cause to dismiss their reputation as the wise beings that they are, I refused to accept this turn of events. Jim had that look, and some of you have alluded, he had a look. He had the look and a little harumph, and that was that. Thereafter, I raised the owl intelligence issue each time I saw him, hoping for some softening of his position, but I'm not sure that there ever was one. I'm grateful to Jim for so many things. Some years ago, we were in London at Eileen's invitation for an Inform event, and I had told Jim that London was not my favorite city. He asked me if I'd like to have a little tour of London, and I said, sure, why not? Jim stayed on for the afternoon, delaying his trip to take me around the city. With his narrative accompanying the carefully curated expedition, I found myself seeing London anew, and it is, thanks to Jim, one of my favorite cities in the world. And of course, there's the Scotch. One memorable occasion, and you actually saw photo proof of this in one of the photos that Jim Richardson showed, was the SISR conference dinner in Barcelona, where the Jims secured glasses for us all from the bartender and then discreetly passed the bottle around under the table to those of us who shared his love of this fine beverage. When I was struggling to improve my French language skills, Jim recommended the roman policier of Georges Simenon. Those old-fashioned yet delightful novels were just the thing. Not too heavy, but smartly written. Each time I found one, I'd let Jim know how much I was enjoying it. Jim was a major contributor to both of the large research projects I've led, and I frequently turned to him for advice. Yes, Véronique, me too. Letters of reference and comments on things that I was thinking about or writing. He was incredibly generous with everyone around him, but most especially to the students. He crafted a relationship with each of them, giving them a lift beneath their wings as they took off in their academic lives. After Jim's death, my student Zahida Alibi wrote to me and said how supportive Jim had been of her, and then told the story of the last team meeting she was at with him. She said, there was the biggest smile on Jim's face as he listened to Sana Patel and I debate social theory and religion. And indeed, Jim would have absolutely delighted in that moment. Jim didn't tell, he lived, drawing us into his circle, making sure to connect us and encouraging us to build community and friendship with each other. He modeled how to balance academic and intellectual interests with broader life interests. His intellectual contributions were and are go-to pieces for me, insights I return to again and again. Moderate social construction is one I'm sure you all recognize, but so too were his life lessons. To care about those we spend so much time with as academics, as people, gentle nudges. Do you know Véronique? Do you know that Inger has twins too? Intertwining our shared love of ideas and the importance of caring for and about those around us. I miss Jim dreadfully, and the only comfort is to be able to spend time with you, people he cared about and who cared about him. I look forward to raising a glass of something fine with each of you to Jim when we next see each other in person. Thank you, Eileen, for giving me this time.
Laurie. Thank you, Laurie. Okay, I'm going to skip then to Suzanne while I fiddle. Suzanne.
Hi there. I'm
You?
just going to say a few words on behalf of kind of all the Inform staff, past and present. As Eileen has already explained, and many of you already know, he began guiding Inform way back in 1991 and continued to offer us his wisdom and support for over 25 years, seeing Inform to its 30th anniversary before retiring from our Board of Governors. And all Inform staff, past and present, many of them are also here and might want to add something later, were really saddened to learn when Jim had died, and we all have exceptionally fond memories of him. He was very much appreciated for upping the catering budget, in particular at the Inform Saturday seminars, which he never failed to attend, so that we could all have chocolate croissants, which was very much appreciated by all. I mean, more seriously, he's remembered by all of us as a brilliant scholar whose intellectual work and insights very much influenced Inform's approach. But he's also very much remembered as this wise, emotionally intelligent, and very generous man with his time and attention. And we all benefited immensely from his involvement and his guidance and mentoring. he was always offering a calm and reasoned perspective, no matter how emotional our audience or inquirers or staff became. And he was also very fondly remembered for always having an excellent sense of humor, always being able to joke or jovially chat about his many hobbies and provide light relief to however serious a conversation or situation we found ourselves in. So all of us who worked with him at Inform universally remember him as a gentleman. He was always a wise counselor and a really great human being. We've learned so much from his involvement in Inform over the years and all the time and generous attention he gave to us. And we hope that we can continue to apply his wisdom going forward, and he will be very greatly missed. Thanks.
Thanks, Suzanne. So, Meredith, can we move to you now?
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, thanks.
Okay, hi.
This is my little sister.
Right. Hello, big sister. Good to see you again. So thanks for arranging this, Eileen. I'm going to skip some of this because several other people have already talked about how we've been gotten together for 49 years since our first meeting in Scheveningen. And so I really am excited about the fact that we have together worked on so many projects, not in a formal way, but in a sisterly or brotherly way of giving contributions, suggestions, and so forth to each other. Eileen Barker spoke my mind when she wrote in her, excuse me, where do I do to?
Wait.
Okay.
I gotta share it first.
Okay. So Eileen Barker, can you see the thing he's posted? Yeah. Eileen Barker spoke my mind when she wrote in her editor's introduction to Jim's Festschrift several years ago. Jim has given us challenging ideas, scholarly inspiration, unstinting support, and enduring friendship. This photo shows Eileen and Jim just a few minutes before Jim presented Eileen her Festschrift. It was a surprise, I believe, and that was at the ISSR meeting in Torino, Italy, the 30th anniversary of our first meeting. All of those of us who contributed to that volume had benefited from Jim's encouragement. So it really felt like we've got things coming back to us through these valued I'm sorry, I've got off my script. I'll just step by. Thank you very much, Eileen, as well as Jim. This next slide was taken a few days before the 2001 ISSR meeting in Ixtapan de la Sol in Mexico. It was great to get to know both Jim's spouses and to discover how many interests we had in common. You often don't have that happening in academic settings. So I'm very thrilled that I've gotten to know Julie and Cynthia and Peter Barker and a number of other members of the families. This is one of my favorite photos of the lot of us. Eileen hadn't yet arrived.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to see what the slide looked like. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if the two Jims took advantage of the women's visit to an outstanding pottery nearby the place we were staying for them to play their perennial cribbage match. And those of you who saw the slides that were at the very beginning, you may have seen the picture of Jim. He was in that particular picture. Jim was in the front of a conga line dancing around the banquet floor of the night of that meeting. So my favorite memories of Jim are in a different context, watching birds together. First in Florida, when Jim Spickard and I invited him to share a cottage for a few days on Sanibel Island. Yes, go ahead and change it. No, that's the Jim Richardson one. So keep going. You can keep going. So we spent a few days on Sanibel Island. It's a large wildlife refuge in Florida, full of magnificent birds. Most recently, I was thrilled to see and hear the tawny owl, which is a life bird for those of us who keep species lists. We were visiting the Beckfords at their Melsomby home, and I had learned many years ago about Jim's special attention to owls that somebody here has already mentioned as well. And I loved giving him sculptures and other images of owls that I had accrued in other countries. This photo is a copy of the front of one of the Beckford's Christmas cards. Jim and I spent nearly an hour watching and listening to the owl's gentle but eerie calls in the growing dark, and the evening felt magical. Somewhere I have read that owls are imputed to have an ability to see what others do not see. I don't take it literally at all, but I can't help wondering if Jim's owl-like abilities to have enabled him to see about religion that which others do not see. I'll stop there. I really miss Jim already.
Thank you, Meredith. I'm going to have one more shot at getting Andrew up on the screen.
And if not, I can do it.
Yeah, I just sent it to you. You got it. Can you do it?
Yeah, let me try it. This should work. You see this?
Oh, yes. Hooray. Thank you.
All right.
I'm really sorry that I'm not able to be with you this evening. I'm having a break in Jersey with my wife, and our ferry arrives just around the time you'll be watching this. I was really sorry to hear about Jim's passing. I first met him in the mid-1990s when I was asked to be the nominee of the Free Church Federal Council, now the Free Churches Group, on the Governors of Inform. Since 2005, I've been the treasurer for Inform, and so I serve with Eileen and Jim on the management committee. If my memory serves me correctly, it was around 2017 that Jim stepped down from being chair of the management committee. So it would have been for around 12 years that Jim, Eileen and I worked closely together on that committee. This involved regular email exchanges, sometimes daily, about matters relating to Inform, and meetings every 2 to 3 months in London at the LSE, or once or twice at the British Academy. There is a lot of work that goes on for Inform in the background. Jim always contributed his enormous academic expertise and great wisdom. He was meticulous in keeping minutes and in keeping us on the straight and narrow. But I'm sure that others who knew Jim well will be aware that our meetings would not have been dull. The business could sometimes be challenging, but with Jim, there was always good humour, warmth, and grace. We would often meet for lunch before or after these meetings, so I got to know Jim quite well. It was great to engage in conversation with him, to hear a little about his family, his clarinet playing, his cycling, and if I remember right, his juggling, not to mention his thoughts about sociology of religion. Inform has lost a wonderful supporter, and we've all lost a great friend and warm human being. It was a joy and a privilege to have known Jim.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Sophie.
Sure.
Marat.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Eileen, for giving me a chance to share my memories of Jim. I first met him in June 1991 when on a British Council program at Warwick University. I was one in a team of still Soviet academics working on higher education programs in sociology, my responsibility being the sociology of education and sociology of religion. 6 months after the Soviet Union, which was supposed to be forever, was no more, the air was impregnated with the unbearable sweetness of freedom. The violence and political oppression seemed things of the past, and world was our oyster. 3 years after, as a result of that program, the Moscow School of Social and Economic Science was set up, the first higher education institution that awarded joint Russian-British MA degrees in sociology and political science. Less than 3 decades on, last December, the current rector, Professor Sergei Zuev, is in prison on fraud charges following intense scrutiny of the Russian intelligence services amidst the continuing conflict between Moscow and London that escalated since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Times have changed clearly. Back to June 1991. I'm meeting Jim Beckford, my first British, indeed Western, sociologist of religion ever, in his modern and immaculately organized office. I'm nervous. How would I handle a conversation with a prominent British scholar, presuming impeccable manners and unsurpassable clarity of thought, anticipating probing questions about the dramas of the perestroika? Jim is living up to my anticipation. You're a perfect gentleman and a supremely lucid academic, except I'm feeling immediately at ease as soon as I hear his quiet and kind voice and realize his sophisticated acknowledgement of my presence and my experience. The lasting impact of that meeting comes later, when I start reading books Jim generously has given me, a sample of his own publications and those by other British scholars. I immediately appreciate his lucid, measured, and balanced style very much as his speaking. Despite, or maybe because of that style, I find his cult controversies, the societal reactions, response to new religious movements, and religion and advanced industrial society, the publications around that time, inspiring and empowering in their own way. They convey the power of sociology to illuminate us about the most exciting concept there is, religion. They inspire us to think with religion, to understand society that operates both inside and within us, outside and within us. Since then, I never lost this admiration for Jim's ability to marry sociology and religion and to keep up with the evolution of that marriage, be this his masterpiece, Social Theory and Religion, or in the series of F.D. Morris lectures he gave in 2014 at King's, and entitled exactly thus, Religion and Sociology, a Marriage Made in Heaven or Hell, ? One of the books Jim gave me at that meeting was The Making of a Moonie, Brainwashing or Choice. That led to my truly life-changing meeting with Eileen in December 1991, and ultimately to me being here with you today, sharing my thoughts about Jim. In the meantime, there were numerous encounters with him at informal board of governors meeting and seminars, each adding that reassuring vibe, transmitting his wisdom and integrity, sometimes in most vexed situations. Sadly, the illuminating, inspiring, and reassuring presence of people like Jim is powerless to prevent the world, or at least some parts of the world, from descending into irrational hatred and violence. But their presence gives us the most precious things there are, the power of clear thinking and the kindness to fellow human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Marat. Grace.
Thank you, Eileen. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Other people?
Yes.
Good. I think I met Jim before any of you, because I met him when I lived in Reading between 1967 and 1971. He was teaching in the department in Reading, having a degree in languages, and we lived in Reading while I was a student at the LSE, and I did go and find Jim, and he was very kind and supportive at a very early stage in my PhD. It wasn't a continuous relationship. I dipped in and out, but I remember him being wonderfully supportive to me when I was trying to rebuild a career after raising children, which is, it's not easy. And I've always learned from that to be as supportive as I can to those of students, postgraduates, postdocs who are trying to do the same. I owe him a huge debt at that point. And he also, like Eileen, steadied the ship when I was doing the Sociology of Religion Study Group in this country, and also Secretary General of SISR. And some of those tasks were not easy, and he was always warm, appreciative, wise, and I could always turn to him like I could to Eileen for good counsel. The last thing I did with him was but a couple of years ago, when he asked me to write with him a biographical memoir of David Martin for the British Academy. I was very touched that he asked me to co-write that with him. And it was a very, a collaboration that I shall now treasure with Jim of David. I mean, there are two reasons to feel very warmly about that. In terms of his academic work, I will remember Jim as a comparativist. I mean, I knew him partly as a linguist. I shared the possibility of speaking French and connections with our French colleagues who I think would like to be part of this. I know Danielle couldn't come this evening, but I think they miss him like we do. And I shall be doing something with Danielle in Archive quite soon, so that Jim is remembered among French colleagues too. And I think I want to say that this evening. He was, of course, a very accomplished linguist and deployed his languages in the study of sociology and religion. Fluent in both French and German, but when I think of his early work, say Cult Controversies, what stands out to me is that it's a comparative piece of work. So too is his work on Muslims in prison. And I think it's very easy sometimes just to think of it as a question of prisons and Islam. It's not. It's a question of how the prison system works in a particular environment. And that is something I always take from his work. And finally, the big compendium he did of edited work on migration and religion. If you look at part 5 of that, it's entitled Contexts of Reception. And I sometimes think, would that our politicians thought more carefully about these things. It's that dimension of his work that really spoke to me and my own interests. But when I think of his love of France, I know that the best way for him to end a meeting or a visit to France was with an extra day, half day, whatever could be afforded in that particular timetable, when he would walk in Paris. And when he walked, of course, he knew the city very well. This always included the bookshops or the bookstores on the Seine. And then he would sit and read his purchases in a cafe before he took the plane home. He really was a Francophile and loved to be in that city. And I will recall that dimension of his life, whereas some of you have recalled others. And between us, I think we have a very warm and composite picture. Thank you, Eileen, for helping us to do this.
Thank you, Grace. Now, Professor Nakano, Can I
Hello?
ask you?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'll show you share the screen.
Yes,
Can you see?
it's coming up. Yes, we've got that.
Okay. I am Emeritus Professor of Soka University in Tokyo, Japan, and Jim was my colleague and friend over 44 years, and he was like a big brother for me. And on 10th of last May, I was totally shocked and devastated by an email from Dr. Barker informing me of Jim's passing. I found it difficult to believe that Jim had died because we had been exchanging emails right up to the end of last January, and he sent me a nice photo of himself wearing a bicycle helmet to make us laugh, this one. And he also invited me to visit Warwick with my wife after the end of this pandemic, and we promised to play a duet. Jim would play clarinet, and I would play the flute. Now, I remember I first met Jim in 1978 when he came to Japan as a visiting scholar at the University of Tsukuba under the mentorship of Professor Fujio Ikado. At that time, he was 36 years old, and I am 30 years old, very young. And I was a graduate student there. And on Professor Ikado's instructions, I took Jim on a journey to visit various traditional as well as new religions, such as Meiji Grand Shrine, Soka Gakkai in Tokyo, and the Ise Grand Shrine, Omotokyo in the western area of Japan, and so on. I now remember a funny happening during this journey. When we are having a dinner in sushi restaurant together with my wife, we ordered and forced Jim to eat sashimi. A sashimi means a sliced raw fish of especially taco in Japanese. Taco is the octopus. Jim sternly refused at first to eat, but I forced again and again, and he finally took a cautious bite. And then he shouted, I ate a monster. Octopus is a devil fish. I ate it raw. Wow. This was an important event in my life. I demand you to write a certificate. Of course, I wrote one in a small paper. And I think that he must have kept it as his personal treasure. Since then, I have met Jim and discussed many times, mainly at the SIS conferences. These ones, Dublin, Mexico, and Zagreb. It's a little bit very sad memorial events. And as you know, Jim has been one of the leading British sociologists of religion, following a generation of Brian Wilson and David March and so on. And among lots of his works, what I shall never forget is his important contributions as a guest speaker together with Jose Casanova with Public Symposium. Titled The Future of Religion and the Religious Studies in the Age of Globalization at the 74th Annual Conferences of Japanese Association for Religious Studies. This is the largest association of religious studies, including sociology of religion in Japan. That conference was held at Soka University, September 2015. He developed a good debate from the standpoint of empirical sociology of religion. I here will show you some photos to remember and appreciate him again. This is a conference, public conference, and then after we had a big eating events, he crushed the Japanese sake together with Casanova, and discussed colleagues. And this is memorial photos with Julie. So, Jim-san, I believe you thoroughly enjoyed the last journey with Julie here in Japan after the conference. And this is a sushi restaurant after the conference in central Tokyo. I hope Julie and Jim enjoyed this one. Your passing away grieves us deeply, but you will remember close to us in our hearts forever. I can very clearly imagine now that in heaven, you are discussing with and enjoying the best claret or drama malt with late professors such as Brian Wilson and Jim Singledo, Fujio Ikado, Shin Anzai, and Yoshia Abe, who all loved Japan and all the members of SISR from Japan, worrying what is going on in the world now. All these professors truly loved the study, discussion, and drinking. And may you rest in peace with them. I hope to join the party in the near future. Finally, I express again heartfelt sympathy to Julie and all Jim's family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's 2 o'clock in the morning for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
5 o'clock in the morning.
5 o'clock. Ah, right.
Yeah.
It's, well, very early.
Very early. Still sleepy.
Well, thank you all, those of you who've already spoken. And now I'd like to open the floor for other people to speak. There are 2 screens I have to look at. So can you use the funny thing that you put up, what do they call it, the reactions, so that you don't disappear, but wave your hands as well. And then I'll try and see if I can find you. And can I ask you not to talk for too long, just so that we can get round as many people as possible. And then once everybody's had a turn, then if we want, we can go on discussing. But there are 34 of us present. So if I could ask you just not to, as I say, go on forever, but we would like to hear. And would anyone like to start? There was a hand there. On the way. Yes. Professor Pellechia, is that how you pronounce your name?
Thank you. Yes, I just briefly, about a little more than 40 years ago, James Beckford's legacy work on Jehovah's Witnesses was a basis for 2 articles that I had published in an international magazine. And I wanted to express my condolences to the family here, but my thanks also to that living legacy, and also to Eileen Baker and James Richardson for their help with Jehovah's Witnesses during issues such as in Russia and that religious movement. James' work to me was a dynamic view of that minority religion of Jehovah's Witnesses, and he raised questions that challenged the theoretical assumptions that others have of religious sects and why Jehovah's Witnesses, it didn't explain about the beliefs of Jehovah's Witnesses. So I appreciate the research and the publication of what James Beckford did. Thank you.
It's always nice to hear people one study appreciate what you've done for them. And Jim was one of the few people I never heard called either a cult apologist or anti-cultist. He was very measured. Vincenzo Pace.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Eileen. Just to select an amount of very good memories I have collected in my mind with Jim. It was perhaps in Torino during the ISSR conference when there was the handover of the presidency of the Jim. And as General Secretary, I decided to give a gift according to this rite of passage, which is a very good rite of passage we had in the past in our association. And I had chosen a decanter. Why I chosen a decanter? For two reasons, praxis and theory. Praxis, because I thought of, okay, it's a useful tool for a very good connoisseur of red wines, perhaps also white wine from Tuscany and Piedmont. But also, I think it was a good symbol because it's a symbol of wisdom. The decanter is a symbol of wisdom of those like Jim who know how to wait for a thought decanting from passions until becoming limpid before drinking it. So it's a very nice memory. I would like to thank Eileen to have invited me and other people to collect these memories. Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. I thought you were going to sing in your lovely tenor voice. Jim would have enjoyed that. Douglas.
Yes, thanks very much. I think we met first time back in 69, 70, when Jim used to come to Brian Wilson seminars. I was a very green young thing. And after having given a not a very good seminar paper, we went to the pub and had a few pints. And I learned quite a lot on that occasion about how not to be overwhelmed by things, which was great. I don't know how many of you received a kind of PhD viva 30 years after you wrote the confounded thing. But a few years ago, when Matt Guest and Martha Middlemiss organized a kind of I thought it was a subtle hint at a pre-retirement conference of people I'd worked with, which the Mormons organized in London. Jim was there, and he'd actually gone back and read this confounded thesis from 1984 and virtually vibed me again on it, whilst all these colleagues sat around. It was the most intellectually stimulating event of my entire academic life. And you know how you get warm if you've been running somewhere? Well, there's an intellectual version if you've been thinking a lot. And that was what it was like, and it was great. It was good to see that Jim, for example, as a sociologist, sat on the religion section in the British Academy, and his advice was so deeply respected there. My last point, I suppose, many of you have been talking about drink. Well, there was one occasion, I think it was 1998, 99 or something, when we hosted the British Sociological Association religion group, long before it was called SOCREL, here in Durham. And at the conference dinner, I remember him virtually rolling in the aisle, because it was one of those nights when a kind of a communitas of laughter broke out. And he would remind me of this down the years since, which I thought was quite lovely. So those festive memories, which many of you have talked about, were there. He taught at Durham for a little while, and he said the best thing about his house at Durham was that he could see the train traveling south away from it. Well, there we are. He then went south. I have not and stayed here. But how lovely it is to remember a man who lived a full life, lived it heartily, and leaving us all to live heartily ourselves, even those of us who are now getting a little bit long in the tooth. As golden oldies, we remember him with joy. Thanks.
Thank you, Douglas. Kim.
Thank you very much, Eileen. So I don't want to talk about drink at all. I might go and have one and raise a glass to Jim shortly, but I'm not going to mention that. I wanted to draw together a couple of ideas that people have mentioned, because the first time that I met Jim was when we were both on a panel, and Eileen was there too. It was organised by FAIR. So it was an anti-cult panel. And what I learned from seeing both Jim and Eileen on that panel, we're talking about the the mid 1980s, I think. What I really learned from the two of them on that panel was how important it was to remain cool and calm and set firmly in your arguments, but without getting impassioned. So I had, previous to that, spent some time working on the Hare Krishna movement. I had a book published, and I was always being accused of failing to wash the dirty laundry of the Hare Krishna movement in public, that somehow or other it was expected of me by those people in the anti-cult sector that one should take a stance against minority religions. Both Eileen and Jim successfully modelled to me the importance of not doing so, but of remaining cool and calm. I couldn't believe their ability to be so unfazed in that setting. And it's that issue of cult controversies that's really stayed with me throughout my relationship with Jim, and that I have taken most from his work. His Cult Controversies book, again in the mid 1980s, what that did, which I still think is incredible, was that it was able to show how religious issues, how religious controversies tell us so much more than they seem to do. They reveal deep and profound ideas about society, about who we are, what we deem to be normal, what we value, and how we and others see society and understand its future. So he was able to reveal what religious conflicts really expose about those foundational social matters. And in doing so, and I think Marat mentioned this, he was able to get to take the sociology of religion, the study of religion, into the broader sociological debates, and to help us to have religion and the study of religion taken seriously at a time when a very secular academy believed religion to be uninteresting, unimportant to study. And Jim, certainly with that book, Cult Controversies, was able to show that religion really was something worth studying. And that not only was it worth studying in its own right, but it was worth studying for what it showed about who we are, what we consider to be normal, the law, the state of the nation, and so on. And so I think that contribution, is really worth remembering in Jim's work, and it's something I take very, very seriously. That he was able to see the social significance of religion and to get that message across into a wider sociological debates. And I really thank him for that. Thanks, Eileen.
Matthew Wilkinson. Thanks, Kim.
Hello. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you all very much, everyone, for remembering Jim so movingly And so it was a great pleasure for us to hear all these diverse aspects of his life from a long time away, from many geographies, and the way that Jim has touched you all, and the words that you've used, such as gentlemanly and kind, and the amazingly selfless way that he supported scholars up and coming, is exactly what I've experienced. I have known Jim for the last 5 years of his life, and he was a lead member of the steering group of the research I lead, called Prison-Based Interventions for Muslim Offenders. Jim, with Sophie, Jim came across my path after I read his books, and was deeply impressed with the detailed and meticulous way that he approached looking at religion in prison, and Muslims especially in prison, and his fair-minded and comparative approach that gave a very balanced appraisal of the effects of religious practice in prison. Then Jim put me in touch with some of the very best people that have assisted my research, such as Dr. Muzammil Qureshi and others who have been the stalwarts of the research. Jim was an absolutely faithful ally at all times. Once you had his friendship and he trusted you, he would always stand by you. And Jim stood by us when we were in very difficult negotiations with senior government ministers and civil servants to get access to prisons. And his presence in the room at meetings, which were very vital for our continued progress, he brought a very natural and deep authority to the field. The people that were there, the senior people, felt that they were in the presence of someone that really knew their stuff and that had really walked the walk. And he walked the talk. He did what he said he was going to do, and he always did it very, very well. And like another contributor this evening said, when he reviewed papers, that project that I led came, broadly speaking, out of a critical realist point of view. And it was only a little time after I found that Jim had been a leading, what one person said, a moderate social constructivist. But you'd never known from the way that Jim critiqued our papers and provided very supportive advice that he had his own particular standpoint. He always brought a nuanced and gentle tweaking and prodding and nudging, and he'd always looked at the detail of our papers, and he was always a critic that was kind. And so what I will always remember from Jim is the way that you can balance detailed intellectual rigor with immense human kindness, and that these two qualities in the true scholars are qualities and virtues that go hand in hand. So thank you all for being a part of Jim's life and supporting Jim. And I'm a believing Muslim myself, so we've made prayers that Jim's kindness and that his duty to knowledge will be rewarded in the hereafter as well. Thank you all.
Now I don't see any hands. Jim Spickard, the other Jim.
I'll make one very brief comment. I've been spending a bunch of time recently going back into the archives of the various journals and reading things like the Furphy lectures from 30 years ago and 40 years ago, and the presidential addresses. And Jim had a 1982 Furphy lecture for the Association of Sociology of Religion on the concept of power in the sociology of religion. And his presidential address some 6-8 years later was on religion and social problems. And what I was struck with those now old pieces is how timely they are to things happening today. They could appear now and contribute to our current thinking. And that's a real gift, to have a friend who is that deep intellectually and that prescient.
Thank you, yes. Well, if nobody else wants to say anything, then I'll just thank you all very much for coming and giving us the opportunity to remember our dear friend and colleague. And I'll put on my slideshow again, which you can watch if you wish, or leave and just have your own thoughts and memories of Jim. And I think we'd all like to send our deep love and condolences to Julie and the family.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you. Thank you, Eileen.
Can you click on the PowerPoint again?